going to be evidence for a kahuna for yuchsin purposes? So the Gemara says, lo, the truma. No, it's only going to be evidence for truma, okay, but not for yuchsin. For yuchsin, this will not be enough. So the Gemara says 1 minute. But all of these things are presumably evidence for the same level of proof that the guy's a Kohen. So if in Bavel, the evidence is he does Nesias Kapayim, and in Surya, the evidence is that he eats challah, so we can't be trying to prove that he's allowed to eat truma, because if he's eating challah, he's already eating truma. Challah is a type of truma. So obviously we're proving something other than his right to eat truma. So the Gemara says, it says similar to eating challah. The same way eating challah is only relevant for something else than truma, i.e. for yuchsin. So duchening is relevant for yuchsin. So you see you can go from that. The yuchsin. It says, no, not necessarily. Achilas challah gufa l'truma. No, challah is evidence, also needs to be evidence for truma. Why is truma different than challah? If you're already eating challah, you're already eating truma. Why do you need this to be evidence for truma? So the Gemara says, no, kasava challah bismana zed rabbanan v'truma dioraisa. No, because it's possible to actually say that they're not at the same level, that challah is only a rabbinic obligation nowadays, and truma is a dioraisa. We'll see why in a minute. And therefore, all of this is how can you prove he's a Kohen in order to give him truma, right? And in order that he can eat truma. And even though he's eating challah, it's not already proven, because challah is only rabbinic. But that can still establish him as a Kohen and evidence that now we can even give him truma. Okay, v'truma dioraisa. Challah is known as a d'Rabbanan v'truma dioraisa. Umaskinan michallah d'Rabbanan l'truma dioraisa. And the chiddush is you go from challah, which is rabbinic, to truma, which is dioraisa. Ukid apich luhu Rav Huna bredi Rabbi Yoshua l'Rabbanan. Like Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yoshua, reversed it for the Rabbanan. We're going to see in a minute that he walked into the base medrash, and the Rabbanan, like the rabbis there, were saying that challah is dioraisa and truma is diorabanan, and he reversed it. And he said, no, challah is d'Rabbanan and truma is d'oraisa. So we're going to see why in a minute. But what we're saying now is that all of this speaks about what's evidence that a guy is a Kohen, and it's not, and for what level of proving he's a Kohen. Does this show that Nesias Kapayim can prove he's a Kohen for Yuchsin? No. The whole Breita is to prove he's a Kohen for Truma purposes, and its Chala has not already gotten him there, because Chala would only be rabbinic. That's the assumption that we are making. Okay, Tashma, let's try again. Chazaka l'kahuna, here's another breita. A presumption of kahuna can be based on the following things. Nesias kapayim v'chiluk granot Eretz Yisrael. So in Eretz Yisrael, either duchening or, and here's the word chiluk granot, which is the point I made before, not just eating truma, but distributing of truma in the warehouses, in the grain houses. That's in Eretz Yisrael. Ubisuria. And now in Surya, all the places that the messengers of Beis Din were sent out from Eretz Yisrael, and they could get there, and they get there to deliver the news about when Rosh Chodesh was, within like 15 days travel from Eretz Yisrael. So those places, which is presumably not Kedushas Eretz Yisrael for Trumas and Maisros, so distributing Truma is not such an evidence. So what is it going to be? Nesias Kapayim Raya. Only Tuchaning, because that is still a Dioraisa there, of low Chiluk Granot, but not distributing of Truma, because it's not Dioraisa. So you will notice, first of all, two things. Number one is that Surya switched sides in this Breita. In the previous Breita, Surya giving out Truma was evidence. Here it is not. So Rashi tells us that presumably the debate of the Breitas is what is the halachic status of Surya? Does Surya have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael or not? In the first Breita, it did. So a Kohen eating Truma in Surya was good evidence, or eating Chal and Truma. And in this Breita, Surya is assumed to not have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. Fine. So therefore it's back to Duchening. Why is it dependent on where the Shluchei Beis Din go? What does that have to do with anything? So Rashi says, well, if the Shluchei Beis Din go there, that means that there is some of the apparatus of the courts in those areas. There are other courts that are sort of satellite courts in those areas. And here becomes the point that it's not just this person in terms of his individual observance would never do this thing if he weren't a Kohen. It's also, as I mentioned yesterday, how much is the tzibur sort of, silent acceptance of it part of what creates the assumption that he's a Kohen. So if it's a place where everybody is ignorant, right, and there's nobody that sort of, or even if people know the halacha, nobody cares and nobody is on top of things, so then the fact that he's doing it doesn't prove too much. But if it's a case where there's a satellite court systems and there are learned people and people that are concerned about the observance level of the community, and he's still going ahead and doing this behavior, then it is more evident. Okay, so that's important in terms of conceptualizing what's creating this presumption. It's A, he has to be doing something that's weighty, that there would be real serious religious consequence to, like halachic consequence to, if he were not a Kohen, and B, that the community is implicitly accepting it, and therefore it has to be a community that would care. Okay, and that's why the idea of A and B. It's he's doing it, and the community is accepting it, and therefore it's only in the case where it's a community that would care if he was actually wasn't supposed to be. It's an Isra Aseh for a non-Kohen to do it. Okay, so you're saying there would be a halachic problem. Okay, so in a halachic problem, usually at a D'oraisa level, which is why we're trying to identify things that are D'oraisa. Okay, it's a weighty type of a halachic violation, which is why Chiluk Ranos in Surya would not be an issue, because that would only be D'Rabbanan, but Nesias Kapayim would. Right, so that's the basic thing that's guiding this. A, to identify something that is a weighty violation, and B, to do it in a context in which the tzibur is countenancing it, and the tzibur would care if he should not be doing it.
Because Yuchsin, there's no violation at all.
Well, that gets back to what the Yuchsin question is. But according to Rashi, it is a concern that he might be a mamzer or whatever. Yeah, and according to Tosos, in the end, Yuchsin ultimately translates into we will let him do avod in the Beis Hamikdash. So all right. So now fine. So that's why it's within those areas only can we go by the Nesias Kapayim. And 1 minute, Bavel Kisuria. Bavel is like Surya, meaning not that Shluchei Basin would get there, but there are Talmidei Chachamim. It's a serious rabbinic community, and therefore, again, you have the other requirement that it's being done in a community that has those religious sensibilities, and that is, and that cares about people's how people are acting and if people are violating. Okay, so that's the second issue: is the quality of the community in which it's being done, that their acquiescence is significant. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, Af Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim. Okay, even Alexandria of Egypt, which is fascinating, because obviously there was a lot of Jews there. It was but it was very cosmopolitan, and it was very assimilated. So at least from what I understand. So it's quite fascinating that that's considered. But again, it might be assimilated, but it could be some of the things that they remained makpid on were kahuna issues and status issues and tumentara issues, right? So assimilation could have been in other areas, but maybe dafka this was something people were makpid on. So therefore, behavior that was tolerated there would be significant. Okay, 1 minute. Barishona initially, based in kvuim sham. So the key word here, though, that qualifies that is initially. Maybe originally we had an outpost in Alexandria. So therefore, if we had an outpost in Alexandria, behavior done there would have been significant, that we had silent acquiescence to. But the implicit point might be, but nowadays they've gone, so off the derech, and we don't have an outpost there anymore, and you can't go by anything that happens in Alexandria. Yes.
Steinsaltz suggests that the reason it was initially was by the time of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Alexandria community had been destroyed by the Romans. Persecution and
so it's not about being less assimilated and more assimilated. It's about being there or not being there. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't sound that way. It sounds like the difference was how much was there a presence of a beast in there. But yeah.
The other question was asked is there was a type of a temple in Alexandria.
Yeah. Beis Chonio. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know did they actually have priests doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating that Alexandria was like a place we could actually infer something about people's kashrus. Yes.
This whole discussion assumes the possibility that we could recognize someone as a Kohen enough to allow them to make truma, but not enough to do avodah in the Beit HaMikdash.
Right, or not enough for marriage purposes. Correct. Right, it's very funny. It's very hard to sustain. It's very hard to right. It's very hard to sustain, like you would imagine, a society in which personal status is partially recognized. Yeah. But it does, by the way, happen like a lot.
Having a green card, but you can't.
Well, but it happens all the time. I got to tell you, it's on a college campus. It could happen in Shelter, but it happens on a college campus. Somebody walks into the minyan and says, "Oh, I'm Jewish," and and they basically, do you give them an aliyah? Do you count them to a minyan, whatever? And the question is like, what? Do you start? You have to say, well, first let's have a whole conversation. Why do you think you're Jewish? And how much does he have to investigate? Or, at certain things, for things like that, which are basically like D'Rabbanan things, there's a Gemara that basically says if somebody says they're Jewish, they're Neman, right? So how much do you sort of, unless I'm saying somebody comes and says to the rabbi, by the way, you should know, the reason he says he's Jewish is because his father was Jewish, but his mother is Catholic and whatever. So then obviously it's different. But without knowing anything else, right, do you give somebody a presumption if they say they're Jewish, they're Jewish? But then if the guy starts now saying, I want you to marry me, right, then a different type of an issue then requires a different level of birur. So this actually becomes a very relevant thing that happens on a regular basis, And then I should mention the fascinating question is, because this is so much, I got to tell you, this Gemara we're learning sounds so irrelevant, but this is so relevant to this question. I'm the rabbi of that minyan. So I know, look, what am I going to do? I'm going to give the guy the third degree. He walked in. He says it's his yahrzeit. He says he wants to daven for the Amud, right? I'm going to say, well, first I have to see your papers. I got to know that you're Jewish, right? Okay, but 1 minute. But, the whole issue about Malin is then, of course this guy's Jewish. He's been going to the Orthodox minyan on campus for the last 4 years. They've been giving him aliyot. They've been doing this. They've been doing that. So then once you start sort of at one level, that creates presumptions that go beyond that, right? And that's the whole issue. Malin mitruma liyuchsin, right? So actually this stuff is highly relevant. Yes.
I walked into the main synagogue in Vancouver, British Columbia a few years ago and said, I'm saying Kaddish from my father's yahrzeit. And they said, no, you're not just doing that. You're davening from the Amud. They'd never seen me before.
Right.
I was flabbergasted. And I davened 3 services.
Yeah.
But
there's also questions. Sometimes it's also about how somebody looks, as well. So, but yes.
But at the end of the day, what do we do? I mean, so if someone walks in, so if someone walks into the minyan.
Says they're Kohen, we believe him. Okay. We're not so afraid now for Yuchsin and for whatever. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Ketani Mihas. We taught nonetheless. Nisias Kapayim. That again, Nisias Kapayim is evidence, okay, for something. So what's it evidence for? My lovely Yuchsin. Again, are we not talking about Yuchsin? Lo, l'chala. No, we mean, is this a good enough evidence that we can give him and he can eat challah? So the Gemara says 1 minute. But the other evidence it said was the eating of truma. But one of the other things that could serve as evidence that he's a Kohen is that we give him truma in the in the granaries. So so the same way that's not about challah because we're already giving him a truma. So it must be about a higher level. It must be that's evidence that was even for marriage purposes. So so the same will be is about duchening, that we're talking about what will serve as evidence for marriage purposes. So right, because the truma issue has already been solved. And the challah issue has been solved. So the Gemara says no. No, we're doing the reverse of what we did in the previous Breita. The previous Breita said he was eating challah, and we said, that's only to prove that he can eat truma. Truma is at a higher level than challah. Here we're flipping it. It says that he's eating truma. What's that evidence for? That's evidence to let him eat challah, because challah is at a higher level than truma. Okay? Truma bisman is derabanan and v'chala deraisa. That truma is the thing that's derabanan and chala is deraisa. Umaskina mi truma derabanan and chala deraisa. And the chiddush is you go from truma, which is rabbinic, to chala, which is deraisa. And now we're going to have the final story where we have the idea is that chala and truma are the opposite of one another, but both possibilities. Rav Huna Braid Rav Yeshua the Rabbanan, like Rav Huna Braid Rav Yeshua just found the rabbis. The Amar Rav Huna Braid Rav Yeshua, because Rav Huna Braid Rav Yeshua said, I found the rabbis in the house of Rav, in the yeshiva of Rav. They were sitting and they were saying, even if you say, you see now how I did the whole base medrash nigun, even if you say that nowadays, because that's how they were saying it, even if you say that nowadays truma is rabbinic, challah d'oraisa, challah is still d'oraisa. Why were they saying that? Why did they think challah was weightier nowadays than truma? Sharei, because behold, Zayin Shekipshu, Zayin Shechilku, the first 14 years when they entered into Eretz Yisrael in the time of Yehoshua, that they were conquering and dividing the land. Okay, Nischayvu b'chala, v'lo nischayvu b'truma. They were chayv and chala and not in truma. Okay, so how do we know that? And also, what does that prove? So we know it because by chala it says bevoachem el haaretz. As soon as you enter into the land. So as from the very moment they entered in, they were chayv and chala. Whereas by other cases of Trumas and Maestros, right, it's sometimes as ki tavo el art, but somehow bevachem is understood as soon as you enter. Whereas other cases it says sort of like ki tavolat v'yashaftem ba, v'yishtem ota v'yashaftem ba. So there's so by other cases the sense is that you have to actually settle it and conquer it before you're obligated. Whereas by chala, the drasha is that as soon as they entered in, they're chayav. So what does that show you? So presumably what he's saying is, why would Truma nowadays not be deraisa? It wouldn't be deraisa because we would say the kedusha would no longer be, exist. Why would the kedusha no longer exist, right? Why would kedusha be shown a low kicha lasid level, kedusha shnia low kicha lasid level? Because once it's destroyed, once the exile, maybe the kedusha goes away. Okay. Now, what is the exile the opposite of? The exile is opposite being settled in the land, having dominion over the land. So if you need to have dominion over the land in order to instill the Kedusha, you could say that when you are exiled, the Kedusha goes away. But that's Truma. But if you didn't need dominion, you just needed presence, right? You just entered the land and it had the Kedusha, and you would be Chayv and Chala. So then even now that there's exile and there's no dominion and it's the Romans are in charge and all of that, our very presence might be enough to be Chayv and Chala. It's a very beautiful limud. So Chala, because they're Chayiv when they walk in before they have dominion, that Chayiv would remain even nowadays, even if it would not have Kedusha for Truma purposes in Eretz Yisrael. Truma and Kedusha for Kedusha purposes has to do with dominion over the land.
The Chayiv of Chala, that is independent even of the presence of the human being. It's there.
Well, you can't be Chayiv if you're not actually...
But in other words,
it's not independent of the presence. It's independent of... They had to have entered the land, but it's independent of them having dominion over the land, over them settling the land, conquering the land. Yes.
When did the man stop?
The man stopped right Erev Pesach. Done today? Mimacharasa Pesach. It says it started like Erev Pesach. It stopped.
That was days after we end.
Yeah.
The first as soon as they entered.
After we entered. Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
1 or 2
It was
days.
like
but
raining on one
okay, so
side
that
and
let's hear the other side of the argument. So I like that. That's yes.
This interesting sequence, like it stopped before Erev Pesach, then they had matzah,
Right.
And so the first bread that they would eat,
Yeah.
they would have to bring
Challah, according to this. That's a nice point. Okay, very nice point. Okay, so that's one version of it. Now so that has Challah Yoraisa. So according to that version, the Breita that says you can have evidence of Truma and Nesiyas Kapayim, we don't have to say Truma and Nesiyas Kapayim means for Yuchsin, because it could mean for Challah, because Challah is Yoraisa. Okay, that's one version. And I said back to them, but no, the opposite is the case. Even if Truma is Yoraisa, because the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael remains nowadays, Chala d'Rabbanan. Chala remains d'Rabbanan. Why? Tanya, Bevoachem, when you enter in. So before we said that means as soon as you enter. But here we're going to say another point. Maybe even if 2 or 3 spies were sent in, you mean 1 or 2 people go in? No, the chem means beviat kulchem, only when all of you enter in. So amarti v'lo bevias miktzas, not only when part of you. Now, fine, okay, so maybe that's needed initially to instill the kedusha, but he says, but maybe it's also needed for the kedusha the second time around as well. Do we go by the first kedusha or the second kedusha? The Ezra, and when Ezra brought them in, we're back to Ezra, like we were just a minute ago talking about the re-entering into the land and the Kohanim and so on. So when Ezra brought them in, lav kulu salik. They did not all of them did not come up. Only a minority of the people returned from the exile, right, in the time of Ezra, and therefore it was not re-sanctified for challah purposes. So here's a fascinating question. You can go to opposite extremes. One extreme is that challah does not require kedusha Eretz Yisrael, which is fascinating, right? It's based on the grain and so on. But on the other hand, it's not just the grain. It's only when the grain is turned into challah. Right, so it is a little different. So you could say maybe it's less linked to the kedusha because it's not the grain itself is chayv and challah. It's only when you actually turn it into dough. So maybe it's less linked from the immediate experience of having grown from the ground. So that's the idea that it's not so linked to the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore challah could be deraisa and truma d'Rabbanan. And then you have the reverse. It might require a higher level of kedusha. It might require kedusha that was instilled not just by the re-entry, not just by Ezra and whoever came in at the time, but it had to be a kedusha of all of Klal Yisrael, which is like a fascinating idea. Why of all things would challah require a higher level of kedusha? But because you could reverse it and say there are different levels, one way or the other, a breita that says you go from challah and nesiyas kapayim for kahuna purposes might not mean yuchsin, might just mean chala, which is rabbinic, and nesias kapayim, which is an assay, to truma, which is a deoraita, or a braita that says nesias kapayim and truma might not mean nesias kapayim and truma for yuchsin, it might mean nesias kapayim and truma for chala. So because you could reverse it, the braitas don't have to mean nesias kapayim.
So two things.
Yes.
One, I don't understand. One of the voach, I'm not just talking about the initial bia. So what does Ezra have to do with this?
No,
Once they had the bia, then that's it.
No.
Koachim came and then
The assumption is that the kedusha of the first time is kedusha rishon is kedusha l'shayta of a low kedusha lasid lavo. It required a second kedusha in the time of Ezra, and that second kedusha was patterned after the first
Right, you don't
kedusha.
necessarily say that, but the other
But that's
question
the
is,
assumption, yeah.
is that with the other one, then the first way is that okay, so then that since there were chayvu chalab the zayin shekivshu, and it's a matter of the grain. So let's say I import or whatever, I'm a grain importer. I import Eretz Yisrael grain. I'm in Bavel. Do I have to take challah over?
Right, so that's the question. Is it basically saying that the chiv gavra if you happen to be in Eretz Yisrael, or is there a different level of kedusha? There's still a grew from Eretz Yisrael, even though it didn't have the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, so those are interesting questions. I mean, this is a really fun, if you would, or interesting Gemara, because it raises the question of this idea of like different levels of kedusha and different senses of a chiv without kedusha, but still based on grain of Eretz
So
Yisrael.
say that?
Yeah.
Like you buy so grain.
No, it's not a total gavra thing. But anyway, no, there is interesting discussions about this. Okay, Tashma, let's come and do Chazaka. So we still don't know. You go from Nesias Kapayim to Yuchsin. We've been trying and we haven't proven it. Okay, Tashma Chazaka lekahuna, a presumption of kahuna, Nesias Kapayim, doing dochening, v'chiluk ranot, and the distribution of truma. So again, either or. Again, we would presume that would mean therefore for Yuchsin, because he's already eating truma, but the Gemara can always say it means for chala. Okay, but now we have a third thing, the edus and testimony. So what does that mean? What do you have to presume he's a Kohen for testimony purposes? So edus chazaka is it edus a chazaka? Okay, meaning, and so it seems maybe it means that Edom came and said that he was a Kohen. So then what do you mean that's a chazaka that he's a Kohen? Edom are saying that he's a Kohen. Elalav hachikama. No. This is what it must mean. Nesias kapayim ki edus. If he's doing all these other things, duchening and eating truma, or distributing truma, I should say, are as strong as direct testimony that he is. The only reason to throw in testimony is to make the point that they're all at an equal level. You want to know how he's a Kohen? Here's how you can know he's a Kohen. You could have testimony that he's a Kohen, you could see him doing the Nesias Kapayim, or you could see him giving truma. So if I say that, even though the first thing was obvious, what it sent a message that all these things are just as good as testimony, that all these things totally prove he's a Kohen. Okay, so that's a pretty good read of that Braita. Okay, so Nesias. Oh, that could be okay. That's true. Nesias Kapayim ki edus. It's just as good as direct testimony. Ma edus liyuchsin, the same way testimony would work for yuchsin. Af Nesias Kapayim liyuchsin, even duchening. So that seems to be a nice read of that Braita, but the Gemara rejects it because it's not explicit. No, not necessarily. Edus haba'a mikoach chazaka ki chazaka. A testimony that is based on a presumption is as good as the presumption itself if we directly witness the presumption. So hearing 1 degree removed testimony about a presumption is like directly seeing the things that lead to the presumption. What is this testimony about a presumption? So now you could just say somebody comes and testifies. I saw the Kohen get truma was distributed truma. I saw this guy do Nesias Kapayim. So we, as it were, the Beis Din didn't see it, but somebody is reporting that they saw it. Okay, but let's see the Gemara's example.
It's not like hearsay, is it?
No. Presumption means we see certain facts, and that allows us to draw certain inferences. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says that means. It's a little bit more nuanced than just being being reported to rather than directly witnessing. Kiyahu, like the following case, and now this is going to be the case that everybody was asking me yesterday about, which is how we would mostly assume somebody's a Kohen, which is what Aliyah did again. Kiyahu, the also Lakamid Rabbi Ami. A person came to Rabbi Ami. Amarle, Muchzani Bezeshu Kohen. I have a presumption, I have a basis to assume that this guy we're talking about is a Kohen. Amarle Mara'ita, what did you see that makes you assume this? Amarle, he said to him, Shekara Rishon Beveis HaKnesset, B'cheskas Shu Kohen. I'm sorry, B'cheskas Rishon Knesset. He was given the first aliyah in the show. So that's to me evidence that he's a Kohen. So then he said back to him, that's what he said back to him. He said back to him, B'cheskas Shu Kohen or B'cheskas Shu Gadol? So how do you know why he was given the first aliyah? The halacha is, at least in principle, although this is not our practice, that if you have a Talmud Chacham, or you give them the first aliyah before a Kohen. So how do you know just because he got the first aliyah? Maybe he was a big Talmud Chacham, maybe he was a Gadol. Okay, maybe it was an important person. Maybe that's why. So how do you know that proves he's a Kohen? And even said he always was given the first Aliyah. Sure, he's always given the first Aliyah because he's a Talmud Chacham, because he's a Gadol.
I guess they don't. They never call him up like Hakohen.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good question. Maybe they didn't have they didn't say Hakohen. Okay, anyway. So how do you know in what capacity he was called up? So Shekara Achrav Levi. No, because not only did they give him the first Aliyah, they gave a Levi after him. Now, what does that prove? Because this raises an interesting discussion in Rashi and Tosas. 1 minute. So if you do give a big Talmud Chacham the first Aliyah, you're not allowed to call a Levi afterwards, right? Maybe they gave him the first and they gave Levi after. So Rashi has one answer, which is that's right. You're not allowed to. If you give him the first one, so as not to confuse things, you dafka don't give a Levi after him to make it clear that this is not because he's a Kohen, and we're not doing that whole Kohen Levi thing today. We're doing who's a more important person thing today. So you bedafka, right? So you bedafka would not give a Levi. That was one answer. The second answer of Rashi is more nuanced. It says, no, if there was no Kohen in the Beit HaKnesset, you could give a Levi next. But if there were a Kohen in the show, and instead you gave the Talmud Chacham, you can't give a Levi next. Presumably, because that's like more deeply offensive to the Kohen. It's like then it sort of keeps the basic structure. We're doing Levi Yisrael, but instead of you, the Kohen, we're giving it to someone else. Okay, so therefore, if there is a Kohen in the Beit HaKnesset, then you would not do Levi. You would work with a different paradigm. Right, and right. So therefore, according to that, the idea was that there was a Kohen in the Beit HaKnesset, and nevertheless they gave him first and a Levi next. That proves that he is a Kohen. Okay, yes.
The Gemara knows how to say Talmid Chacham. You've said important person interchangeably.
Right.
Is it only a Talmid Chacham, or it could be the wealthy person who built a shul?
Yeah, so it could be the second. I mean, more. I have to double check the discussion in Gittin. More normally, the discussion is about giving like a Talmid Chacham first. But you're right. The Gemara does say Gadol, which is broader. You said
Tosfos has a different way.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what Tosfos' way is.
Well, the term they use is
so
Tosfos is a great Talmud Chacham.
So therefore, so Tosfos is even more complicated. Tosfos says no. Here's what they have. They gave this guy the first Aliyah. They gave a Levi who was a very non-substantial person, the second Aliyah, non-substantial status, and then they gave a Yisrael who was of greater status, the third Aliyah. Oh, wow. So that was proof that they were doing Kohen Levi Yisrael, because if they were doing it based on status, the Yisrael would have had before the Levi. Anyway, all right, one way or another, the fact that the Levi came after is proof that he was a Kohen. All right, so that was the proof that he got an Aliyah. Okay, the Halei Rabbi Yomi Lakuna Alpiv, and Rabbi Yomi therefore were able to assume that he was a Kohen. Now, there's a couple of questions here. We've been pulling our hair out to figure out, can you go from Nesias Kapayim, which is an assay, to Yuchsin, and here we're going just from the fact that a guy got an Aliyah and establishing that he's a Kohen. But it doesn't tell you for what purpose he's established he's a Kohen. Right. Maybe it means for, I don't know, for Truma. Maybe it means for to give him the Aliyah in this new shul. I mean, it's not exactly clear for what purposes, right? It's certainly, we would assume, based on all the discussion earlier, that we're not talking about Yuchsin. That's number one. Number two, though, is, so how does this show, what does this mean, Eidus of Chazaka? So one way to read it is just, look, we didn't see it directly, he reported it. But Tosfos says, no, it's a little bit more nuanced here. Eidus of Chazaka means, as opposed to like seeing him eat Truma and seeing him do Nesias Kapayim, there we directly saw him doing activity that only a Kohen would do. Here, the only way we knew he was a Kohen was not just that he got the first Aliyah, it was based on something that happened afterwards, which was based on who got the second Aliyah. So that's a type of an Eidus of a Chazaka, meaning it's like, it's like not even direct Eidus of what he did. It's Eidus based on the presumption, based on what we saw afterwards happen in terms of the second Aliyah. All right. Anyway, we're back to our idea that we don't know that you can go, although there seems to be a lot of evidence, you can go from Nesias Kapayim to Yuchsin. We've been resisting it, and we've had other explanations. But now what we have introduced also is seeing a guy get the first Aliyah and Shul, and using that as a basis, at least for some level, of presuming he's a Kohen. And now we're going to have another similar story. Let's take a look. Ahud Asa Lakamid Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. A person came to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Amalei said to him, Muchzani b'zeshu Levi. I know this guy is a Levi. Amalei, Mara'ita, what did you see? Amalei, Shekara Sheni Beis HaKnesset. He got the second Aliyah in the Beis HaKnesset. Becheskas Shu Levi was the presumption that he's a Levi. So I'm sorry, he said back to him, Becheskas Shu Levi or Becheskas Shu Gadol? How do you know? Was it because was it presumed that he was a Levi, or presumed that he was maybe a Chash of a person? So the Gemara says, no, Shekara Lefan of Kohen. No, because we were keeping the structure a Kohen got the first aliyah. So we weren't doing the structure of who has, just more important, who has more status and so on. We're doing the Kohen Levi Yisrael structure, and he got the second aliyah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Levi Alpivs, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, interestingly, was willing to consider him a Levi. What does that mean? It means for giving him Maaser. Okay. Now, so two interesting stories about going from getting an aliyah and shul for Truma and Maaser, but we're still, Yuchsin remains the gold standard. A certain person came to Reish Lakish. I know that this guy's a Kohen. Amarle Mara'ita, on basis of what? Amarle Shekara Rishon Beis HaKnesset. He got the first aliyah in the show. And again, maybe there was something, they had the whole other discussion that a Levi got after him. But now we're going to have another pushback. Amalei, he said to him, 1 minute. But did you ever see him directly get distributed a truma? For he was not impressed that the guy got an aliyah and show. Meaning, even if he got an aliyah and the Levi got afterwards, right? Until now, we've said that one of the things that is the proof is that the person is doing something that would be a serious violation, right? They're duchening. If a non-Kohen were to duchen, it would be a serious violation. He's eating truma, right? So it's not just that he did some behavior. He did a behavior that would be a serious violation if you weren't a Kohen. So since when can we make any presumptions that he got the first aliyah? Somebody walks into shul, says he's a Kohen, says, yeah, I'd like to get the first aliyah. I'm a Kohen. Okay? So, he's not a serious violation. So what type of presumption can you make? So Reish Lakish pushed back. I'm not impressed that he got the first aliyah. Did you see him ever get distributed truma? That's the type of thing I want to be looking at. 1 minute. So that's what Reish Lakish said back to him. So Amalei Rebbe Lezer, so Rebbe Lezer was there and he said, V'im ein sham goran bat lekahuna. He says, and I don't get it. If there's no threshing floor, if there's no granary in that town, so therefore we can have no presumptions of kahuna, meaning it's very nice that you want a higher level of proof, but it's not always available. In a lot of places, the only evidence is that the guy gets called up for Kohen, right? Now, of course, the question is, why isn't there also the evidence about Nesias Kapayim, right? Because presumably everybody there did, like the Sephardim do nowadays, like we don't, is that they did a daily Nesias Kapayim. So it's interesting that there's like a level between Aliyah and Truma, which is Nesias Kabayim. But anyway, that was his pushback. Rabbi Lezer said, Reish Lakish, it's nice you want that higher level of proof, but that's unrealistic. You're going to say that if there's no, if this isn't an agricultural town or whatever, that you can't assume anybody's a Kohen? 1 minute. So Zimnin, now we don't know what the end of that story was, but another time, Have Yasvi Kamei to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Eliezer and Reish Lakish were sitting in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? An exact same type of story came. Somebody testified about a guy that he got the first aliyah, that he was a Kohen. Amalei Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish was the one that testified about him. And Reish Lakish says, somebody else testified about a guy got a first aliyah, came to Rabbi Yochanan and said he's a Kohen, and then Reish Lakish said to this guy who was coming and saying, I saw him get a first aliyah, Amalei Reish Lakish, but did you ever see him get truma? So Reish Lakish is sticking by his position, which is that I need to see him get truma before I'm willing to assume anything. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, V'im ein sham goren bat lekahuna, and if there's no goren, are you going to tell me that there's no kahuna? So Hadar Chazi Rebbe Lezer Bishos. So then Reish Lakish gave a dirty look to Rebbe Lezer. Why? Because Rebbe Lezer and Reish Lakish were like students of Rabbi Yochanan, or Talmid Chaver of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rebbe Lezer challenged Reish Lakish with a line that's clear that where did he get this line from? From Rabbi Yochanan. So basically Reish Lakish was upset. He says, if you were going to push back on me at that other first event, you should have told me that it wasn't your idea, Rabbi Yochanan. It was Rabbi Yochanan's point, and then I would have been more receptive to it. Okay, so he gave Rebbe Lezer a dirty look, and he said to him, Amar, and so Reish Lakish said to Rebbe Lezer, Shamata mili de bar nafcha. You heard the words of bar nafcha, which was a way of referring to Rabbi Yochanan, whoever he was. V'lo amartalan mishmei, and you didn't tell it to me in his name. You should have told me that was a Rabbi Yochanan. That Rabbi Yochanan said, I'm not impressed by getting an aliyah. I need to see him get truma. Okay, so now excuse me. Reish Lakish wasn't impressed that he got an aliyah. Rabbi Yochanan says, you can't always insist on the truma thing. There's not always truma that's available. If there's no goren, are you going to say there's no kahuna? So anyway, here you've got the idea that we're introduced the idea that you go from an aliyah to assuming he's a kohen, but that actually, even if it's not for yuchsin purposes, actually is a big chiddush, because until now we were talking about more weighty things, doing the Nesias Kapayim, getting truma. So now we see that actually is debated. That Reish Lakish actually says, I'm not impressed that he got an aliyah. I need to see something something like truma. But Rabbi Yochanan, and then Rabbi Lezer, who got it from Rabbi Yochanan, didn't say he got it from Rabbi Yochanan, pushes back and says, you can't always insist on truma. You're going to tell me that if there's no granaries in this place that we can't make any presumptions, so getting an aliyah is good enough. Of course, the fascinating question that remains is, okay, good enough for what purposes, right? And it seems like, since we're also dealing with the demand of truma, so it seems like the purpose that we're left with is yochsin, right? Because if you got truma covered and you got, so what's left to prove other than yochsin, unless of course we mean challah, right? Which is always that funny option, okay? But the fascinating thing is that this Gemara, while we were, pulling our hair out about, can you go from Nesias Kapayim to yochsin? It sounds like in this Gemara, the maskana is that Rabbi Yochanan is willing to accept, just getting an aliyah as evidence. And sounds like maybe even evidence for Yuchsin, which is like really shocking. Yes.
So presumably this is also in the place of no negative evidence, right? Someone would say, well, what's this whole discussion? I saw he married a grusha, or I saw him go in Beit HaKavarot. Would that be good enough to knock down the chazaka?
Possibly.
Or would we say maybe he doesn't know, Yeah. He knows the coin, he's willing to get the first aliyah. He doesn't know anything about Beit HaKavarot. He doesn't know.
I don't know. I'm sure it has to do with various, realities and presumptions. I don't know.
Just point. At first, I thought that Bishut was like he was embarrassed.
No,
it's Aramaic. It's Bish for Ra.
Bad, right? He gave him he gave him a dirty look. Okay, fine.
He was embarrassed.
What?
Because they have a note here saying because he wouldn't have said that in front of Rabbi Yochanan if he knew. He repeated himself the mistake in front of Rabbi Yochanan.
The word's an Aramaic word for Ra.
No, Reish Lakish, it wasn't a mistake. It was Reish Lakish's position. Yeah. So the way Rashi says is that Reish Lakish says, the reason I kept my position was because when you told me your critique back there, I didn't realize it was from Rabbi Yochanan. If you had told me that it was Rabbi Yochanan's position, that he said that you don't need to see the distribution of Truma, I would have reconsidered my own position.
Right. He was saying that he was embarrassed because if he had told them originally...
Oh, then I wouldn't have said that to Rabbi Yochanan. I wouldn't have got Rabbi Yochanan to push back at me, right? And now I had to be embarrassed by Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, that's good. All right, anyway, so this is fascinating because if you would ask us, how do you know somebody's a Kohen? The first thing most of us would say is, well, did he get what aliyah did he get? And here we're seeing that Rabbi Yochanan is prepared to accept that, and maybe even for Yuchsin, which would be shocking. The Gemara doesn't spell out for what purposes. Okay, so let's take a look. The Gemara says like this. Okay. Okay. Rabbi Chia. Okay. Rabbi Chia. So now we have a debate of Rabbi and Rabbi Chia. Chad hela ben api aviv. One had a son being treated as a Kohen because the father said he was a Kohen. L'kahuna. Now, of course, if the father is a Kohen, of course, we're going to presume the son is a Kohen. Now, it's possible not. It's possible he's a halal and a grush and whatever. Right. So the point is, though, the pshat of the sugya is that the father says, "This is my son," and therefore he's a Kohen. Okay, so we don't know that he's his son, but we'll trust the father that he's the son, and therefore
we'll know he's a Kohen.
No,
so you said we don't know he's a son.
That's what I did. I did mean that. Okay, we know that the father's a Kohen. Okay, and if he says so, if we know he's a Kohen and we know this is his son, we don't need to trust the father. We just assume that he's a Kohen. We assume that he's not a halal. The case is we don't know that this is his son. And he comes into town and he says, by the way, everybody, let me introduce you to my son. He's been living abroad for the last few years. He's my son. He's a Kohen. We believe the father. Okay? So Chad, hela bein api aviv l'kuna, v'chad hela ach api achiv l'levia. And it's a similar case. And the other one trusted accepted the testimony. Hey guys, this is my brother. He's visiting from out of town. He's a Levi. Give him maaser. Okay. So now we're having about believing another person, direct testimony, but it's only edus of an echad, and it's edus of a karov, right? So that's there are two issues. It's a karov and it's eid echad. So eid echad could be better. It's a separate person. It's not your own activity. But again, before it was the fact that implicitly the community was accepting it, that you were doing certain activities that would have been a violation. Here we're a different type of a genre. It's just straight testimony, and testimony of somebody that's a karov. Okay, so let's take a look. And one did the father and son, and one did the brother. Okay, Tistayim, let's conclude. Rabbi hela ben api aviv. Rabbi was the one that trusted a son based on the testimony of the father, l'kahuna. The time we taught a brisa. Somebody comes and says, "B'ni zev kohen. This is my son, and he's a kohen." Nema, he's believed la'achila b'truma, that he can have him now eat truma, and we'll give him truma. Ve'enu neman lahasio isha, but not for yuchsin purposes. Divrei Rabbi, that's what Rabbi says. So explicitly, Rabbi says we believe at least for the truma level. Amar Rabbi Chia, so Rabbi Chia said back to him, look, make up your mind. If you're going to believe him for truma, you should believe him for marriage. And if you don't believe him for marriage, don't believe him for truma. So he does not seem to be buying in to this whole division that we've had for the last 2 days, which is you can believe somebody at the truma level, but not at the marriage level. Now, Tosfos has a whole discussion about why really Rabbi Chia would buy into that division, but he just means that it's not a legitimate type of a division. I won't unpack the Tosfos. Whatever. I won't unpack the Tosfos for you, but at least at the surface, it sounds like Rabbi Chia doesn't believe you can have different levels, but Tosfos says he does. But there's and he explains why it's specifically a problem here. Okay,
you could have a guy eating truma and being able to marry a grusha.
No, we're not talking about allowing. No. So let me again clarify. Yuchsin does not mean that we relieve the restrictions of a Kohen. Yuchsin means that we believe he's enough of a Kohen in order to allow him to marry somebody that a normal non-Kohen would not be allowed to. Right.
Obligations.
Right. No. It'd be like a high level, like, this very miyuchas family will only marry Kohanim. Okay, and that's the point. So it does not mean that we it does not mean that we allow things. Okay, it means that we don't. Right. We don't believe he's a Kohen to allow him to marry a miyuchas families. Okay, but obviously we wouldn't let him do things that we know are violations for Kohanim. Okay, now. So that was Rebbe. Rebbe believed the testimony of a father on the son, at least for truma purposes. Amalei, so he said back to him, no. I will believe him for truma purposes. Is this guy, the father, basically, he could go ahead, take his own truma, go home, and give it to this guy that he's saying is his son. So since if he wanted to, he could feed his son truma anyway, I'm going to believe him when it comes to truma issues. So that's a new idea, a wrinkle. It's not just truma is a less weighty level. Okay, it's that no, actually, and again, we're dealing with a new concept, Eid Echad, Karov. So he's saying, here's why I believe him. I know he's an Eid Echad, I know he's a Karov, this, that. But if he wanted to, he could feed the guy truma anyway. So I'm going to believe him for truma purposes. Okay, but I don't believe him in order to let him marry a miyuchas woman, because that's not something he could do on his own if he wanted to. Okay, so you see that Rebbe believed the father for the son, and even though it's Eid Echad and Karv, whatever, he believed him only at the truma level, because at least truma was something that he could have done all on his own, even if we wouldn't have believed him. Tistayim, that's a good proof that that's what Rebbe holds. I mean, the Rebbe hella bein up yaviv lekahuna. Now, if Rebbe was willing to marry the son on the testimony of the father for kahuna, Rebbe Chia hella acha piachiv lelevia. It must be that Rebbe Chia was the one that was able to trust a brother. Somebody say, "This guy's my brother," and he's a Levi. So now let's just read one more line about this. Rabbi Chia Maishna ben Delo. Now the Gemara is assuming, and it says it's not clear why the Gemara assumes this. Like maybe because Rebbe had one case and Rabbi Chia had the other case. But the Gemara assumes that somehow there's a debate. Well, certainly in that bright that we just quoted before, Rabbi Chia pushed back on Rebbe believing the son and the father. So the Gemara is assuming Rabbi Chia pushes back on Rebbe and saying you either believe the whole thing or believe nothing, which presumably means that Rabbi Chia would say I wouldn't believe the father on the son at all. So why would Rabbi Chia not believe the father on the son, and he'll believe one brother on the other brother, right? He pushed back on Rebbe about the father and the son. Why doesn't he have the same problem about brothers? So Maishna ben Delo, the Karov waits Alaviv. So if the son, not because he's a Karov. Achnami, Karov waits Alachiv. So by a brother also he's a Karov. So if we're not willing to believe a guy that he's the father, don't believe somebody that he's the brother. So let's just give it one more minute and read the answer. It says, yeah, you're right. For Rabbi Chia, it really isn't about father, son, and brother. It's really about whether it's a formal testimony or just like the guy's just en passant. The guy is just talking, and because he's talking, sometimes interestingly, there's more of a presumption that he's telling the truth when he's not conscious of what the consequences are. Like if I'm coming to testify, hey buddy, this is my son, I want you to give him truma. Hey everybody, this is my brother, I want you to give him meiser. So maybe he knows what he's thinking about the consequences, and maybe therefore he's lying. Of course, you could say if he's formally testifying, he's more telling the truth. But maybe also if he's very much consciously doing it, he's thinking about the consequences, and maybe he has an ulterior motive. But if somebody's just gossiping and schmoozing, we maybe more presume that he's telling the truth. So unless, of course, if somebody knows how to work the system, that's how they'll get people. But okay,
or like the Shmuel.
Right. All right. So let's take a look. Let's just read the story. B'mesiach lefi tumo. Ki hadam Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, like Rav Yehuda said, name of Shmuel. Ma'isa badam echad shaya mesiach lefi tuma. There's a person who was just talking like in all innocence. Literally means talking in all innocence. Amar and said, Zachorni, oh, but I remembered. When I was a baby, or whatever, a small child, I was taking a piggyback ride on my father's shoulders. And they took me out of Cheder. And they removed my cloak. And they dunked me in the mikvah, so we could have our truma meal that night. So he explained this whole thing about how they would always take me to the mikvah, and so that night we would have the grain that everybody had been giving my father. So maybe you didn't even realize what it meant. Oh, you know what that means? No, what does it mean? It means you're a Kohen. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay, so anyway, but you have cases like that. You have cases like that people have no idea. I saw the funniest thing when I visited the grave of my grandfather. It had these hands, and pictures or whatever. Okay, so okay. The Rabbi Chia Messiah, and here we get Rabbi Chia himself. Rabbi Chia concluded this by saying that this was the end of the story. And all of my friends would keep their distance from me. Oh, don't get close to Yochanan. He's the holy challah eater. We have to keep our distance from him. Okay, and based on that testimony, Rebbe allowed him to be considered to be a kohen.
Yeah, so dramatic childhood, everybody making fun of him, beating him up.
At least give him reward.